Today's video is sponsored by Famous Faces and Funnies, located in Melbourne, Florida, as well as Docking Bay 94, located in Boca Raton, Florida, and Ian's Display Stands. Click on the link below, and remember, shipping on all three is nationwide. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Codename New to Vero 2. Hi, I'm your presenter, Shabu Are You. I wanted to start this episode by reminding viewers about a very early episode I had made on the channel. I raised the question, what GIJoe / Cobra vehicle is most associated with GIJoe? In the same sense that the X-Wing is associated with Star Wars and vice versa. So and this is just for the common, everyday person, especially those that grew up in the 80s. So if you say Star Wars, the first vehicle that pops into mind is an X-Wing or a TIE fighter. And that's, 9 out of 10 that's going to be the case. And if you ask what's the most popular vehicle in Star Wars, 9 out of 10 people are going to say X-Wing and TIE Fighter. So G.I. Joe is a little bit tricky because, of all the vehicles. And when I raised this question in that episode, I've got a plethora of responses. You like that word. But I heard the Sky Striker, the Whale, the USS Flag, the Mobat, but all of those vehicles had real-world application to them, especially the Sky Striker. When you see a Sky Striker, I think of Top Gun, and I'm a fan. So I kind of, again, there's no right or wrong answers. It's just for fun. But the two vehicles that I targeted that I think of is the Skyhawk and the H.I.S.S tank. So what we're going to do today is, this is actually I recommend watching Forum BX257, HCC 788, and Timmer's videos on the history of the H.I.S.S tank. I'm basically going to give a summary in a nutshell as we look at the Walmart 2020 release of the H.I.S.S tank and compare it to the later releases. And Alex, there were three main versions of the H.I.S.S tank that was released from 1983 to 2008. But in the vintage era, there was three. The first one, the 788, was clear, and in the middle run, it was like this. So this is the most popular version of the H.I.S.S tank. And then there was the mail away that had white letters. So those are the three, the same mold, it's just the sticker color was different. And as I do the opening, we'll go through some of the history of it. But it's important to note, before I dive in, is that the H.I.S.S tank was actually a creation of Mars. So Mr. Destro, that was his foot in to get that contract from Cobra. Before, they had a different, if you guys remember, in the very first issues of the comic series, Cobra was actually buying weapons from another supplier. And it wasn't until, I think, issue number 11 where the H.I.S.S tank actually makes its first appearance, and shortly afterward Destro enters the picture as well. And I find that's what makes G.I. Joe comics so much fun. It's all these little, intricate parts that are moving in to drive a storyline and to point where we're still enjoying it today. And I always find that to be very interesting. And just to add, I would like to say that I think the Skyhawk is the other vehicle that is very popular with G.I. Joe, as well as the general public. When they see A or B, and this is mainly a contribute to the Sunbow cartoon series, so when they see either vehicle the normal general population will say, "Oh yeah, that's from GI Joe," and I think that's why these two, in my opinion, are the most iconic vehicles associated with the brand GI Joe. So here we go with the unboxing, and real quick, isn't it so damn cool to see these on the shelf once again in that iconic hardback and artwork? It's just, man, I'm sure like me, a lot of you are just like, if you're able to find them, you're enjoying seeing these and just going back to some nice good times. So we're going to look at the box and box art itself and compare it to the original release of it. And it's a pretty good modern representation of that iconic box. So let's crack this thing open. Oh, another thing to point out is I actually have the 83 blueprints, so we will get to compare that as well with the modern version of them. All right, so now we broke the seal. Oh, wow. So here we have the driver. And it's in parts, so we have to put it together. So here are all the pieces. So this is the modern blueprint. And just to put it to scale, that's the difference. So it is tiny. And there's no details as far as like, you know, we have everything nice and labeled. And the vintage one, the modern one, does not have that feature whatsoever. It's a little disappointing, but you know, I mean, it's only paper. I don't see why they didn't do that, but whatever. So once unboxed, these are all the pieces that everyone should expect. And again, they're using the 788 that's part of the middle to late run of the retail releases. Remember, this was retailed from 83 to 85, and then it switched over to mail away. All right, we got the bottom part in. Gosh. Now we have it assembled. I just have to apply the stickers, and we'll do a comparison and everything more after I do that. But here we have, of course, the modern figure. Put that on with this figure stand. It says Cobra Trooper, so I'm a little disappointed in that. You know, it should say HISS driver, but whatever. I know that I know with the Bazooka Trooper, like if you see on the shelf, like he's properly labeled Bazooka Trooper. See, I think you could see it there. Then you have the Night Stalkers, and so on and so forth. So with the modern figures, I mean, why not? It doesn't cost anything. That's a big miss right there. And then we'll compare and there's a comparison between the modern and the vintage figure, and it's pretty spot on. You know, the blue is a little bit darker. I don't know if you can tell from the video on the modern than on the vintage. And also the black is a little bit more prominent than on the vintage than on the modern figure. But again, I'm not a big modern fan. I mean, what I just showed you on the shelf is pretty much the extent of my modern collection. But alrighty, so while I'm applying the stickers, which is fun, let's talk a little history regarding the Cobra High-Speed Century, aka the H.I.S.S. As mentioned, its first comic book appearance was in issue 11, but that was more of the prototype version. A more accurate toy version appears in issue number 19. The H.I.S.S makes its first cartoon appearance in the very first episode, part 1 of the mass device. During our playtime, kids would often pair off the H.I.S.S versus the Mobat, but that wasn't often the case in the comic or in the cartoon, with only two 90mm double Diablo guns versus the Mobat's 130mm cannon and 50 cal secondary weapon. The outcome would be one-sided. They would have to operate as a pack of wild dogs in order to defeat a more powerful opponent. And maybe this is just me, but it doesn't appear that in either the Sunbow cartoon or the comics that the H.I.S.S is being used as a tank per se, but more like a utility vehicle with treads. Along with issue number 43, another all-time favorite cover is issue number 75, where you have Serpentor on top of a H.I.S.S tank with the Baroness tied on like a trophy or prize that, sent through the other half of the Cobra faction during the Cobra Civil War. You want to talk about fan service and hubba hubba? Woo! That is the H.I.S.S. Now going back to the toy, I mentioned the 3 versions during the vintage era, but it's important to add that from 83 to even now, 2020, the H.I.S.S tank has been offered from time to time, and we're going to show some of the important variations of the H.I.S.S during all of this time. And also, I wanted you guys to note that in the very first H.I.S.S tanks, if you look, when you're assembling the turret, this modern one has 3 things that slide into its piece. The 83 version only had 2. So that's another way to distinguish between the earlier versions to the ones that were offered from, I think, 85 going forward. Now, every iconic vehicle, even the Ferrari F40 and Enzo, eventually gets replaced. In 1989, the H.I.S.S 2 rolled out, but it never really replaced the OG H.I.S.S tank. Yes, it was a little bit bigger than the original H.I.S.S tank, but still, it kind of failed to capture that it factor. And around 2010, version 5 of the H.I.S.S tank came out. Another redesign or a completely different vehicle. It's your call. And this was part of the Pursuit of Cobra line and based on the movie adaptation. So I call that its own vehicle in itself. Now, in the IDW run in the comics, we actually see all 3 at the same time. So, I think they're all independent vehicles and not replacement. Because, they brought this one out in 2020. So, there's no way in hell you're going to replace the iconic. And now here we're going to do a little test. I tried to fit the modern figure in the old H.I.S.S tank. And you could see it doesn't close properly. I don't know if you want to bend the knees and squish it. Maybe I didn't want to try that with the canopy. And all you guys know from how delicate these plastics are. I tried the new one, and again, it doesn't. You kind of have to bend it and kind of play with it. Inside each cockpit, it seems like it's a different mold than the original one. The back of the seat back, where the old one it's completely flat, the new one has kind of like a crisscross pattern, so there's a difference there. I don't have any modern H.I.S.S tanks, to compare to. I am an OG guy. I know Timmer would probably be better. Actually, Timmer's the best person to watch when it comes to his tanks because he's nutso about his tanks. And you see I'm just continuing playing around with it, seeing if I could just get it just right and perfect, with the modern thing. Because it's new, you push it a little bit more. I mean, it's brand new plastic, so it could take it. But with the old one, hell no, I'm not going to even try it. So now I'm using, these are Black Major female Cobra Troopers, and this is what I actually use in my display. And that's why I love getting Black Major figures, is because I think this was based off the 2005 GIJoe convention. But again, because the white color, and I have one African American driver and one Caucasian female driver, it kind of like adds a little bit more when I have these H.I.S. tanks on display. And because they're in the white uniform, it kind of pops to go with that red a little bit more. Again, I guess these are kind of like tweener figures, in the sense that they're in between the vintage and then the modern figures. So that's why I call them tweener figures. Anyway, that's going to sum up this edition. I want to thank 3D Joes for the pictures, YoJoe.com for the pictures, Timmer from Half the Battle, and HCC 788 and Forum BX257. And you hear Maya in the background going crazy. Anyway, this is Shabu RU signing off.